Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to Total Warhammer 3. I'm Lord Forward, and today I've got a guide for you on the new faction, the Tallyman of Pestilence, a new Nurgle one. This is part of a larger series I've been doing on the various Nurgle mechanics and factions, so if you don't see what you're looking for here, go check out the other guides. Just in the description below should be the playlist to them. And this is part of a larger Total Warhammer 3 series I've been doing as well. If this video helps you, do like, comment, and subscribe. And let's jump right into it. First thing you'll notice is we are 13 turns into a campaign. There's two reasons for this. First off, the starting situation for this faction doesn't allow you to really see who's around you. So you're a unique faction. You actually start with 2 settlements, but before we get into that, let's look at our legendary Lord Epidemius as well as his unique mechanics. You are the Plague Panjardum. I'm probably saying that wrong. You gain rewards based on the number of plagues on non-Nurgle factions. That's actually slightly misleading. It's not. I'll explain it later. Your Plague Flesh Poppies building, which is one of your low-level military recruit buildings, cycles faster. You recruit Plague Bearers of Nurgle and Exalted Plague Bearers at a higher level, and any Plague Cultists you might have move 25% further. That's particularly useful when spreading your plagues. So, the unique mechanic he has is he has access to the Tally of Pestilence. The Tally of Pestilence counts the number of non-Nurgle armies and settlements currently infected by Epidemius' plagues. The number of infected targets, the greater Epidemius' power level. It's slightly misleading. This implies the number of plagues. This one implies that it's the number of plagued settlements or armies, meaning one plague can get multiple of this tally going. So the different levels is, even with just one, which I just did right before I opened this up to show you that, you get 10% research rate, as well as the Earthfather's Blessing, which is an immense damage spell. I kind of feel like they accidentally left on some decimal points there, but basically you can target an enemy, you basically kill it, and you summon a unit of Nurglings, which is really nice. You've got to hit them when their hit points are less than 10, though, and that's the important thing, and you can't do it to lords or heroes because that would be way too strong. Also, any non-Nurgle armies with the plague have less leadership, which is a nice bonus. Now, at the next level, it gets stronger. You have a ability on your leader called Tallyman's Blade, where he summons Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle. You get additional use. Research rate goes up. You get Plague Afflicted. Also, by the way, this Earthfather's Gift is a passive. You don't actually have to cast it. You get on non-Nurgle armies Plague Afflicted. This is if they are fighting your army, they suffer damage to self while in melee. So if you throw a plague on an enemy army and then you attack it, they will take significant damage just from fighting your units, which helps with Nurgle units' low damage and ability to kill people. They also replenish slower, have less leadership. The next level, and by the way, getting past 9 armies or settlements infected takes a significant investment. It's not particularly easy. The next one, Tally, 35 research rate, Earthfather's Boon, still same thing. Tallyman's Blade goes up, summon 3 armies, 3 units of Exalted Plague Bearers per battle. You have to summon them each individually. And then finally, if you get to the end, 50% research rate, another summon, for 4. Greater Plague Afflicted, they suffer more damage, no casualty replenishment, basically. 15 is almost negative, as well as leadership. It really hurts enemies if you can get that going. Now, getting it going is slightly easier said than done. Putting a plague in your land and expecting it to spread might get you the first couple levels, but in order to get to the highest ones, you have to really focus on how you're going to do it. So if we were to create a plague, right, and we'll just create one here, and we will put it in this settlement. Now, we have to, in order to get to the higher levels, you're almost definitely going to have to increase the duration super high, because as soon as a settlement loses a plague expiring, it is deducted, which is quite frustrating. So if we create that and we increase the spread chance, obviously I can't afford it at this moment, but if I did, it would work. So we'll summon a cultist here. Now, remember, plague cultists get additional move, which is nice. We will spread a plague here. Now we have 2. So if we process forward a turn, okay, we were actually unlucky in the process forward. It didn't infect other settlements. But you'll notice now that the plague that was up here has spread to our settlement, this count has not increased, even though it is technically plague. So it has to be non-Nurgle ones. It can be difficult. But if you have several cultists and you send them out at the same time, it will be much easier to build up your pestilence totals. That would be my recommendation. Is save up a huge amount of infections and use them all at once if you wish to get to the highest level. I personally, in my 2 campaigns as this guy, didn't feel it particularly necessary. It became a little bit more useful on higher difficulties. The legend one in particular needed some use of this to weaken enemy armies, but the lower level campaign, by and large, I just ignored this. Sometimes I got a bonus, sometimes I didn't. It can be quite fun that way. But anyway, let's go over starting situations now, because that's the major unique mechanic for this faction. If you're going to use it, you're going to need to generate massive amount of infections. So thinking plenty of toxic spores places to get you that. Don't neglect putting on your edicts. The edict that gives you additional infections, if you put it on early on, will help you. Starting it early will build up the numbers as the game goes on, save you quite a bit of time. So in your starting situation, you have 2 settlements, which makes you fairly unique. You have Forest of Decay and the Bilious Cliffs. You have an army here. There will be an enemy army out here. Fight, win the battle, recruit units. If you could recruit units prior to the battle, that is good as well. But beat it, recruit as many of the summoned units as you can. Then you'll notice that your army is about 3 turns away from healing. You're going to want to go and use one of your unique unholy manifestations to give yourself 20 casualty replenishment rate. You won't be able to move for a couple turns. That's fine. On the 3rd turn after you use it, because it uses 2 turns, you want to get as close to Tower of Flies as possible, because the turn after that in my both campaigns, the demons of chaos over here are at war with the same faction, which was a Zechian faction. They will take that on the next turn, so around turn 6, because 1, win the battle, recruit, 2 more, 3, 4, 5. On turn 6, they will take Tower of Flies. So you need to take it around turn 5. You could theoretically rush it with your starting army when it's weakened. You just don't want to lose any units because of how hard it is to recruit. You'll see we're 14 turns in. I have yet to build a recruitment building. Once you take Tower of Flies, I recommend making peace or ignoring the Zeech faction that controls these other settlements. The Legion of Chaos will take them out if you leave them alone. You just don't want to lose Tower of Flies, and you also don't want to ruin your relations with these guys. Thankfully, they start off with historical relations. You can get a truce. They'll usually give you military access as well, and then you can forget about this. I never had them in my campaigns betray me. In fact, the next move, and I highly recommend it, is once you've taken Tower Flies, you march your army back towards the Bilious Cliffs, set up an ambush outside, and declare war on Malice Darkblade, Haggrave. Now, Malice is an amazing fighter, and the auto-resolve seems to favor him heavily. You may have to fight this on your own. I had a full settlement in I had a full army in Blackrock and a garrison in Blackrock, and it still said I would lose decisive victory. I fought the battle. It was super easy to beat him. Pin his units down with your melee frontliners, plague bearers, nurglings, blast them with your plague-ridden spells. I think I lost like 70 units and killed his whole army, barring Malice, who fled. And then I hunted him down and killed him. Right now, this is just the remains of his army trying to get a settlement. He never got anywhere. In fact, he never even managed to finish off the Slaanesh faction in the lands. The next move you should take as Epidemius here is to, once you finish off Malice, declare war on the Subtle Torture Slaanesh faction. Take these settlements. If you can, get them all, get the full region. If you don't, be aware that the, whatever his name is, the prince guy over there, Sigvald is out there, and he tends to expand this way. So if you find him, make sure you've gotten up to Nurgle's Blessed if you don't want to go to war with him. The additional diplomatic relations should make him non-aggressive to you, at which point you'll control 3 regions, and you should be fairly safe. At which point, the win condition for your faction is pretty simple. Kill off Boris Ursus, who in my experience dies on his own. Hag Grief, you're already in the process of killing off or have killed. Masters of Innovation sometimes die on their own. If not, it's a simple sail across, take them out. They are the hardest foe if they are winning. The Slayer faction of the dwarves is an absolute pain to fight. Their armies are very strong. I recommend having 2 armies, setting one up and then ambushing to kill him. If you fight in the battle, be aware he does have quite a few summon army ability type stuff. Plus his slayers are very hard to kill. If you're fighting slayers, you want to burn them down fairly quickly. Surround them. If you can, isolate each slayer unit or hit them with spells. They do have spell resistance, dwarves, so it is harder than you would imagine. But until you get them weak enough, their entities really just don't die, which means they do a lot of damage. Against the dwarves, I actually found that a lot of the Nurgle units were fairly unhelpful. This is where the spreading plagues really helped, but the Chaos Warriors of Nurgle that you can get your hands on through this tree, the Rancid Aloe, proved to be more useful. Specifically, the ones with great weapons proved to be very good against normal dwarven units. Against Slayers, against Slayers is really hard. Let's just put it that way. Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle proved to be your best unit. They've got a decent range, they do some damage, and more importantly, they poison and they're magical, so they ignore any physical resists Slayers might have going. Now, Epidemius himself doesn't have any unique bonuses through his faction, but he himself does have some other stuff. He's the curator of Pestilence, Tallyman's Blades, which I kind of mentioned earlier, but I'll go over again. Summon a unit of Exalted Plague Bearers. They degrade over time. The reality is, if you summon it behind the enemy line on, say, Malice's Bloodrack Medusa or someone else's artillery units, you'll probably kill them, or at least throw them off their artillery by the time the unit dies. And if you've got a couple of the plague tallies going, like level 2 or 3, you'll have multiple summonings. Now, other stuff he has regeneration when fighting against an enemy with plague. This means you want to hit the enemy you're fighting with a plague unit. Thankfully, you can summon plague cultists to his army and then march them over in usually the same turn, because they start with movement speed, which is rather odd, unlike other heroes. You get regeneration as well as your army attacks better. Very helpful versus the dwarves and versus Malice. Now, in terms of his abilities and skill points, Epidemius is fairly normal. He's a melee lord, which is kind of unusual for a demonic faction leader. Route Marcher to start. Blessed by Blight will help you the most early on because it's expensive to maintain a full army. Serve or Die becomes more useful as the game goes on and you're recruiting more units because Nurgle units are expensive. Unholy Resilience, Pestilential Spawnings, definitely max that out. You want the growth and the casualty replenishment rate. You could do something like Despoilers if you're going to raid, but Relentless Advance, at least level 1, is always worth a point. If you've got extra points, Lightning Strike is amazing. Renowned and Feared, definitely snag that. Then you'll be up here for his unique line. Tally of Pestilence is quite nice. Basically, if he's in battle and his allies around him are demonic, they gain physical resistance and attack, which is unbelievably good considering how weak Nurgle units really are in melee combat. In terms of killing things, they're decent at defending. This makes them significantly tankier as well as actually allow them to hit and kill. Very useful. Tallyman's Host here, your Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle, which a lot of people forget have a range unit. It's not the world's greatest range unit. You only have 3 ammunition, but if you take Tallyman's Host, you will double that, as well as your flying units will do more damage as well. And it's also cheaper to maintain Plague Bearers, Exalted Plague Bearers, Pox Riders, and Plague Drones. Basically, if you haven't figured out already, the game really wants you to use Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle as this guy. Plague Bearers as well, but the exalted ones are the ways to go. Pox Seedling is interesting. Any newly captured settlements you take have a population 1 surplus, meaning you can usually upgrade them on the first turn, and all your provinces grow slightly faster. As Nurgle, you want to get to 200 growth in every province. 5 growth isn't amazing. Kugath, for example, starts with 10 growth. Still, this helps get your lands going faster. I'm not going to, well, I'll try it. Renitent, however you say that. Never seen that word before. Rentient. Your demonic units are recruited with more health. Very useful for a faction that recruits units damaged, as well as all your demons get physical resistance. Stacks amazingly well with Tally of Pestilence. Your units can be running around with 30 plus physical resistance. Plague Lord's favorite. Cheaper to create plagues. All enemy units have a reduced plague duration. Essential for a faction that's all about creating plagues. In fact, the wider your empire is as this faction, the easier it is to spread plagues at different ends of your empire. Otherwise, this will help you if you've only got a limited targets to spread plagues on. Perpetual pestilence. Oh. 10 hit points. Tallyman's Blades upgraded. This one, you have an infinite range. Otherwise, Tallyman's Blade, you have a range of 50. This is a huge buff. Basically, you can summon your army of plague, exalted plague bearers anywhere on the map. Jumping behind them doesn't have to be around your lord. It makes him a pain to fight. It makes it much easier to win battles as him, because you can start a battle and then summon something when his units move off. He also has Slime Trail, which is a nice passive ability. Reduces hex and melee speed around where he is. It's a very small range, but considering this guy pretty much wants to be in combat with Tally of Pestilence, it works fairly well. Do be aware, because he's a legendary lord, he tends to push into the enemy units as his other units get killed around him. It's very easy for him to get surrounded and killed, and his stats are not good enough to be surrounded by enemies and not die. However, Locus of Virulence increases armor piercing and melee attack for units in range for a short time, again combining very well with Tally of Pestilence, the other stuff. Bloated Carcass, get this if you're fighting range units, otherwise ignore. After you've filled that out, you've got a choice. You can make him a better fighter, which is usually the best move for demonic legendary lords. Epidemic Outbreak in particular is very nice. Lowers enemy speed, charge speed, doesn't affect enemy troops. It's an explosion ability that does some damage. Pestilence Decay here at the end. Direct damage to all enemies around you while your lord is fighting in melee. So it incentivizes you to turn him into a fighting lord. However, if you don't want to do that, or you think he'll get killed on his own, basically get better at not throwing him into armies that will kill him immediately. But if you don't, the red line here, you get to pick. Armor of Malady here affects your Plague Bearers of Nurgle. Oddly enough, it doesn't affect the Exalted Plague Bearers, which is just kind of strange to my mind. I suspect it's probably, according to this, a flavor text problem. If not, none of the other ones listed either, which is a pain. Blight Swarm, however, very useful on your army. Weakens enemy melee defenses so your units can kill them faster. Terminal Infection, though, Plague Bearers of Nurgle. Again, it doesn't say Exalted, which is just really strange. I have a feeling they've overlooked that in the description. I seem to remember it affecting it in my campaigns, because none of the others affect it as well. However, Virulent Contagion up here increases the reduction of melee defense, but lowers the usage of Blight Swarm. Very useful if you're going to buff your army. With this guy, you throw him into combat with a bunch of Exalted Plague Bearers. He's going to kill a lot of units. He's basically, I think, the most offensive in terms of melee combat of the Nurgle Lords. Yes, Turmerkan is very strong and his heroes are good, but this guy makes your actual army able to kill things in melee, whereas Kugath is more about an unkillable line of Nurglings and spells. This guy, melee. It's the way he goes. It's very fun. It's a very easy campaign. Once you control the north here, you're basically free to do what you want. You could attack the other Chaos factions, but why bother? They all do non-aggression pacts with you, especially once you get the relationship tech here. At which point, the easiest way I found was to pack up shop, sail south, and invade Bretonnia. You could invade the Empire, but I found Bretonnia tended to be a little bit more vulnerable. Plus, if you're in Bretonnia, you will then probably go to war with the vampires count up there, assuming Bretonnia hasn't won, which is possible they have, which makes it more difficult. But fighting vampiric factions is your bread and butter. Very easy to do. This is assuming, of course, you don't rush to kill the Slayer guy up here, Malakson, or whatever his name is. Don't let him grow. If he's winning, you have to invade him earlier or he will invade you. If he dies, which seems to happen less than like 30% of the time now, invade Bretonnia. I wouldn't particularly pick a fight with the elves in their islands here, just because they have a lot better range units and you're not particularly resistant to range. If you fight the elves, definitely get cavalry units. There's no real reason to go after the Dark Elves. They'll probably die to the other Chaos factions. The Empire tends to fall or get overrun by Vlad. Vlad is one of your worst enemies if you try and invade the Empire, because the Vampire Lords are as good or stronger than yours, and they can usually out-heal your Nurgle factions. And since you're not as heavily a spellcaster as, say, like Kugath, it's very hard to overcome them. You could rampage the Norsca, not particularly hard to do. There's really no reason to do so unless another faction is conquering them. And that's about it. I mean, this is not a very hard win condition. To go longer, you have to destroy the Kislevites factions, who usually die on their own, in which case, oddly enough, you have to get to Labheim, which just boggles my mind that this is the win condition. It just feels wrong. There must be some canon book reason for it. It's not particularly hard to do. Just send an army down there. The downside is it may be owned by the Chaos Warriors of Chaos Nurgle faction up there, or it may be owned by Vlad. And that's why Vlad can be a pain, because by the time you get there, usually Vlad is very strong. I recommend sniping that as one of your last 80 settlements you need if you're going for a long victory. Your short victory gives you Winds of Magic Power Reserve, less useful on this guy than some of the others because you don't tend to have as many spellcasters, seeing as you can win melee. Once you get this, though, definitely start including spellcasters. It will help a great deal. The other thing to mention is your starting area here has medicinal plants. Can be worth building this up early so that you can put out like a money-making plague or a reduced upkeep plague, and it will stay in your lands. The reality, though, is most of your plagues should be outside of your lands if you want to take advantage of this mechanic. I really say always have one plague hitting enemy settlements. It will make a big difference. And that will be it for this faction. This is not in the realms of chaos, so it's truly just an Immortal Empires one. I believe this is unlocked by having a Creative Assembly account. Mine unlocked automatically. If you don't, there's a process to register for that. You can find it online. You get a couple unique lords and heroes for it. It's probably worth doing. Anyway, that will be it for this guide. Hope you enjoyed it. Do like, comment, and subscribe if it helped you. And I'll see you guys all in another guide or Let's Play. Bye for now.